What things do people commonly do in your country which other countries find bizarre? The UK has a really strange habit of mixing up imperial and metric measurements, seemingly at random. Often people will use both systems, and have their own personal preferences for when they use each one. For example, if I was going for a run I'd measure it in kilometers, but if I was talking about a walk I'd just been on then I'd probably say how many miles I went. I order pints from the pub, but measure cooking ingredients in milliliters. It's not like we all understand both systems perfectly either. I measure my weight in kilos. My wife measures hers in stones. Neither of us understand the units the other person is using, despite being the same age and having gone through the same education system. I can imagine people in other countries finding this totally nuts. Why not just pick one system and stick with it? We're going to vote about things every 3 months. Whether it's buying fighter jets for 20 billion or building an amendment for a school, a vote it is, baby. It's an interesting way of doing things. On the one hand, I really like the idea of more democratic power going to the people, and I'd hope that regular engagement in these kinds of votes would increase how much people are interested in politics and how much they become informed about it. On the other hand, the UK has had 2 national referenda in my lifetime, and both times round it ended up being a shitfest of misinformation from the media followed by a bad decision. I suppose you need the whole of society, including the media, to buy into a basic degree of honesty over the issues involved. A lot of people in Switzerland just vote according to what their party recommends. That is true for people who always vote, but don't care that much about a specific topic. Usually those people don't decide the vote. It is down to mobilization, for example people who don't usually vote. You have to make them feel strongly in one way or another to make them care and vote. Congratulating anyone closely, or even moderately, related to someone whose birthday it is. For example, if it's your birthday, it's very normal for others to say congratulations to your parents, siblings, uncles, aunts, etc. In addition, forming a circle with chairs at nearly every birthday party where your seat is pretty much fixed for the entirety of the party. So, you're thus forced to talk the whole time with the people to the left and right of you. There's very little mingling. Unrelated to birthdays, often if you're a guest at someone's house and it's edging closer to dinner time, it's implied that you need to leave unless you were explicitly invited to dinner beforehand. There's rarely if ever spontaneous, "Hey, would you like to stay for dinner?" invites. To add to that, birthday calendars are often hung in bathrooms, toilets. So we can take our sweet old time remembering this month's birthday people. Today I learned Dutch people are really into birthdays. One always mentioned the dish drying cupboard, which for some reason is ubiquitous in Italy and Finland and almost non-existent in other countries. Above the sink we have a cupboard that is metal grill racks instead of solid shelves, so after washing dishes we can store them directly and they air dry in place, without the need of drying them by hand or putting them in a drying rack to be moved again when they're dry. With dishwashers this is much less handy, but growing up without a dishwasher it was so useful. I lived in the UK for 3 years and I genuinely never realized that this is a thing that only we have. I just thought I moved into a weird house. We mostly drink ultra-hot temperature milk. When there are threads about ultra-hot temperature milk on Reddit, people from all other countries keep saying that it's the most disgusting thing ever, that they drank that in the army and they couldn't stand it and so on. I honestly don't get it. I tried fresh milk quite a few times, in different countries, after this to see what I was missing out on, and honestly I think it's good too and it has a little more taste maybe, but that's it. UHT milk still tastes perfectly fine to me. Maybe it depends on what you grew up with. Same in Spain. Although I know a lot of people that only use milk for coffee, or maybe cocoa powder, and never drink the milk alone. I can't stand milk alone, ute or otherwise. I honestly don't get UHT milk, the flavor that is, not the utility. It just has a weird taste to me and it ruins a cup of tea. To be honest, I don't think your example is bizarre. It's pretty logical that something like it happens when a country uses a mixed system. Then again, I don't think that going to sit in a dim 100 degrees Celsius, 210th, room, naked, once a week and sometimes continuously hitting yourself or your buddy, family member with tree branches is bizarre, but some people might. Edit, added nudity and freedom. I'm gonna add making infants sleep outside during winter when it's 20 Celsius or more. TBH, I don't know how common it is nowadays. Germans look for eye contact, both when talking, listening, but also in things like traffic to know that we have the other person's attention. Also many like to observe their surroundings. For foreigners, this is often unusual and they feel uncomfortable, but it is usually not meant in a bad way. Oh okay, so the bald German man on my street who stares at me intensely every day as I get home from work is just a normal guy. I suppose his duct tape and sledgehammer are traditional German items. They indeed are. The duct tape was historically used to fix up things as one strolls through the city. Someone's motor breaks down. It would just be weird if there weren't about 8 or 9 guys showing up bringing duct tape and other tools to fix the stranger's car. And traffic light breaks down. Thanks to our emergency duct tape, a bystander can just take the emergency street signals, tape them on their hands and regulate the traffic from that point on. All about that sweet, sweet German efficiency. The sledgehammer is a traditional tool as well, as we Germans found it rather ineffective to use crowbars or similar tools to break into our victims' houses due to noise and neighbor complaints as well as time. So, indeed nothing wrong with this guy, just your average German guy. Because there's a language divide in Belgium, you might not always know what someone's first language is, and their last name isn't always a clue either. M. Janssens can be a French speaker, and Mev Dupont can be a Dutch speaker. Not to mention that both of them may or may not speak English. Once in a while, if you're not sure what language the other person speaks, there's a funny little dance to figure out what language to do things in. Waitstaff usually say something like, bonjour, goeiedag in Brussels, and they let you answer in whatever language you want, or they wait for you to say hello and they respond. If both parties speak English decently well, and not the other's language, then things usually happen in English. When the first sunny spring days come, you will find Swedes standing on street corners and just about anywhere and even stopping whatever they were doing, and just stunned with their eyes closed and face tilted up. We can finally feel the warmth of the sun for the first time in months. It isn't uniquely Swedish, but due to being so far north, but something I've heard as bizarre for people who haven't spent a winter without the sun. Crisps as a side dish for a warm meal. If it's in a restaurant or some sort of fancy meal, there'll be homemade crisps, but at people's homes it's common to use crisps from a bag. Ironing everything. As far as I know, ironing stuff like t-shirts, jumpers, jeans, etc. is already not so common in many places, but people here often iron even underwear, pajamas, bed sheets and things like that. Is that a generation thing? My elderly relatives always iron those things, but I never bother. In Ireland most people use metric for everything. Some measure their weight in stone, but most in kilograms. Temperature is always in Celsius. Everything except height. I am a religious metric system user, but I have to use feet for my height because nobody knows how tall they are in centimeters. That we eat sweaty sandwiches by our desk in silence when it comes around the middle of the workday, school day. That we don't talk much to strangers. That we don't want to sit together with others on the bus/train/tram/plane. That we put our babies to sleep outside however cold it is. That we like to strap on 2 planks and glide around in a snow-covered landscape. That we like to go as far away into nature as possible, preferably alone. That we treat our winter sports and the athletes like the Greek and Roman treated their gods. In Italy rabbit is a common meat, but people from many other countries find the thing horrific. We do also eat horses, but that is less common, depending on the region mainly, and more divisive topic also in Italy. I once had a horse sandwich in Puglia, my first time tasting the meat, and it wasn't that bad. We eat octopus and piglets. I watched some American TV shows that found that weird. In Slovakia, and a few neighboring countries probably too, the main meal of the day is the lunch eaten at or afternoon, and it consists of 2 warm meals, starting with soup. The second and main meal can be also a sweet meal, which would be considered as a dessert in some countries, like perinatal copyright bhakti, jam-filled dumplings with cocoa, sugar and butter makafe copyright sulans, dumplings with poppy seeds, sugar and butter or cakes and other sweet meals. Is that not the norm in other countries? I thought lunch was soup and a second dish everywhere. I'd say train spotting. I remember explaining a group of people at a train station to a French person I knew why they didn't even believe me, and though I was just making it up, that someone want to see our shit commuter train from the 1970s and make a note of it in a book. I work with one guy who does a bit of train spotting. He only goes out his way to see particularly noteworthy trains, though I don't know what constitutes a good train, the Flying Scotsman, and loves the museum in York. He's got Asperger's, or in his words I'm a total fucking stereotype. Having a pig leg in our kitchen. Most shops closed after, and Sundays, meal in towns. Banks that are open only at the morning, same for family doctors. In shops or supermarket we don't queue in a defined line. 2 kisses when meet someone. I am a fan of the TV show Hoarders. It's American and everyone uses pounds. Except when measuring garbage, then they use tons. And I thought, up until recently, there is only one type of tons. But no, it's not. There is metric tons, and short tons. Sigh. Watching an episode of that show always inspires me to get off my couch and start cleaning my apartment. Fra 1/4 skoppen. My grandfather always used to go to a pub on Sunday mornings after church to meet with his pals, having a glass of wine or two so their wives had some space at home to prepare lunch. I am not sure whether this happens everywhere in Germany or anywhere else in Europe, but hadn't I grown up with it I'd find it rather bizarre. Restaurants here aren't always open at lunchtime. My parents' one does, and they say they get a lot of emails, FB messages, and phone calls from foreigners asking if they're open for lunch because a lot of places aren't. It's actually something I've never really stopped to think about. I know the US isn't a part of Europe, but I just gotta share what I find bizarre about it. From the first day of kindergarten, 5 to 6-year-olds, we are expected to recite the Pledge of Allegiance. I find this unnerving as an adult. It's definitely a bit creepy looking. Being heavily encouraged to stand up, face a flag, recite a pledge, hand on heart, etc. It all seems a bit like something from the 1930s. How about paying insane premiums and deductibles to pay for basic healthcare? Like $4,000 for an ambulance? Not to mention you got people with maggot brains who defend this bullshit because they believe a corrupt politician who loyally serves their campaign donors? Question mark. I doubt you need to figure out which country I'm from. But let me give you a hint. We had an orange Teletubby for a president. Leaving baby strollers out of sight with sleeping babies in them. We use baby monitoring units mostly with sound. But we will literally go to a coffee shop and not be able to have the baby stroller within vision for half an hour. Regarding queues, do you keep people from cutting ahead of you if you were there first? In the US we take this very seriously and you'd easily see arguments or altercations at the grocery store over it. Depends a lot, for example the amount of things. But mostly yes, it's respected. Unlike USA, here consumers fill the shopping bags, but clothes shops. We have the last two as well. One thing I heard was something uniquely Belgian is that students who rent an apartment in the city they're going to university at will go back to their parents' house every weekend. I thought this was a global thing, but apparently not. It's so they can hang out with local friends, wash their clothes and so on. Edit. Okay, so I heard this fact on the radio when they were talking about things unique to Belgium, but apparently it's not so unique after all. Damn radio station should do some more research. The phrase by any metric seems more useful in Britain than I supposed. How for my country, we have long proud tradition of voting useless, corrupt politicians into the parliament. Also cocarazzi. Exactly. And then I think it was in the 60s or 70s the words under God were added. 1. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Where's the liberty in having to recite the words under God? And I thought that the whole point of the pilgrimage to America was to have the freedom from religion. It is odd how the US, with official separation of church and state, ends up with things like this, and gives Christianity a heavily privileged role in society, whereas over in the UK there's an official state church and the head of state is the head of this church, but church attendance is tiny and religion plays a really small part in day-to-day life. As it should be. Christianity is heavily encouraged. It's primarily Christians that seem to be running for political office, and everyone seems to conveniently forget about that tidbit in the Constitution about separation of church and state and freedom from religion. Is horse meat controversial? Except for young teenagers, I've never really heard anyone complaining. At least not anyone who regularly eats other kinds of meat. Absolutely, it is controversial in many countries, even a taboo in some. North Americans and Brits are often horrified of the idea of eating horse meat. We don't eat a lot of horse meat in Finland, but we eat reindeer, which sometimes seems to elicit similar emotions in some people. From Wikipedia, horse meat is not a generally available food in some English-speaking countries such as the United Kingdom, South Africa, Australia, Ireland, the United States, and English Canada. It is also taboo in Brazil, Poland, Israel, and among the Romani people and Jewish people the world over. Horse meat is not generally eaten in Spain, except in the north, but the country exports horses both as live animals and as slaughtered meat for the French and Italian markets. Horse meat is consumed in some North American and Latin American countries, but is illegal in some others. The Food Standards Code of Australia and New Zealand definition of meat does not include horse. I know this. I meant I don't think it's very controversial in Italy. Slightly related, the Netherlands has a phenomenon called Roktdag Skirt Day. It's the first spring day that's warm enough for women, and other skirt wearers, too. Subconsciously, yet collectively, decide that it's time to ditch the jeans and thick tights and just have bare legs under a shortish skirt. This is a big mood. We have the same here. The image this conjured up is just so lovely with a smiling face. Sounds familiar. And it's unthinkable to spend a day off indoors if the weather is nice. Because for all you know it could be the only decent day for weeks to come, so you better make the most of it. As an Ohioan, one of the best kind of winter days is when it's still snowing but the sun is beating down some warm rays. Those are moments I live for. When first sunny warm spring day happens, in Slovenia everyone goes cycling. Even dogs. Not really, but it feels like it.